What is going on? In this video, we're going to speak about best practices for sampling on a hardware sampler. More importantly, older samplers. There's some things that you can do that are best to become routines in your regular sampling. And if you can get these down into a habit, the benefits will carry a long way on any sampling platform. But first, I'd like to invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our sampler channel. And with that, let's get to it. The first thing to be concerned with when sampling into a sampler is the initial input level of your audio signal. Getting a good level going into the sampler ensures that you use up the most amount of the bit depth available to you, ensuring optimal audio quality. And there are exceptions to this. If you find that overdriving the signal and clipping the signal gives you a certain tonal quality that you prefer, that is fine. Another exception is if you want to record your signal so low that you introduce noise and other artifacts from the sampler itself or from external audio gear like a hum or a buzz that you find creatively useful, that's also perfectly fine. But in a regular sense, getting a good level going in is ideal. And we'll revisit this later on in the video. Just know that it is a very helpful step to take initially when sampling. The second best practice is to edit and commit to the parts of the samples that you want to work with by trusting your ears. Most new samplers on the market give you a visual reference of a waveform to help you decide where the start and end of a sample is. A practice that I would encourage is to use your ears more to gauge where the front and the end of the sample are. This pays big dividends when you're actually programming these drums because they won't start exactly right at the beginning of the sample because there'll be some variance just on what you're hearing. A lot of the times when we use a visual reference, it will be accurate as far as the start of the sample is concerned, but you may lose a little bit of magic that exists maybe a few milliseconds before, whereby using your ears, you would have kept that in because it sounded nice and it would sound like the start regardless, but visually it would look odd. And when you begin to program your music like that, that magic and that special character that exists in the sample will be retained instead of chopped off just because it didn't look right. And these are things you could hear, especially in older boom bap records, where the samples weren't completely dead on because there was no way to tell. There's no way to actually see on an SP1200 or a S950 or an Exonic EPS or any vintage sampler without a visual display. You couldn't really tell and you had to use your own creative gauge to estimate where the sample is. And we're pretty good as humans at getting really close to the start of things. It's just that we're better at retaining the vibe of a sample by using our ears than we could ever be in a visual sense. So next is truncation. Truncating a sample is the concept of getting rid of the parts of the sample that you didn't choose to use. So for example, if I wanted to actually capture a hi-hat out of an entire drum loop, I would adjust the front and the end of the sample by ear and get rid of the parts that I didn't want by truncating them, making the audio file smaller, which frees up more memory. Now, of course, this is more important in regards to memory for older samplers, simply because older samplers don't have a lot of onboard memory. But why is this important when you're using software samplers? Truncating your samples gets you in the habit of committing to the sounds that you're using. It gets rid of the urge to second guess things. If you've committed to something, it's already done and you have to move on. So by truncating your samples, even on this small little level, it helps with procrastination and aids with faster decision making. If something sounds good to you and you decide right there on the spot that you like it, you take action by committing to it and then you can move on, which is great for improving your overall workflow. Little things like that can improve your confidence in the whole music making process, because the simple idea of committing to truncating a sound is really an exercise in trusting your own abilities to make good decisions as a musician and producer. And lastly, if you have the option available to you, normalizing samples is a great tool to use. Normalizing essentially makes your sample as loud as possible by looking at the loudest point of your audio and bringing it up to the maximum headroom available in your audio workstation. Now, this is a luxury because on older samplers, a lot of them don't have a normalizing function, which makes it even more important to be mindful of the first step that we spoke about, which is getting a good level going in. The most annoying thing is when you have a group of samples and the levels are just all over the place between samples, and it can become difficult to even get your musical ideas off at that point because of the volume differences in between the samples. You may not have enough headroom to bring a very low sample all the way up to nominal level. And if you have a normalizing feature resident on your sampler, this will just completely take care of that problem. But just in case you don't, it's always a good idea to get it right the first time while recording the sample. And that is it. If you're just getting into samplers and sampling as a musical art form, these steps are best practices to ensure that you have the best experience while using samplers from various sources all the time. And you won't believe how quickly this will become a habit of yours. You won't even think about it after a while. And that's the way it should be, because it definitely will make your life much more enjoyable and fun. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you liked and learned something today, subscribe to us here on YouTube. I will catch you on the next one. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Peace.